G'day, I'm Philman86, and I have been known to make a mod or two. And I have no shame in telling you that everybody shits on my mods. That aside though, there has been a new BeamNG update that happened last week. There is a plethora of all of these updates that have happened. Just lots of little things, lots of small improvements, including one little strange one. They've added incompressible object buoyancy simulation. The simulation method doesn't have the buoyant object auto rotation in water problem. Well then, I suppose we have no evidence that it works. Great. Unfortunately, no tire rework. They're still made out of triangles, which makes driving great. And still no aero rework, so there's no ground effect still. Hooray! The big star of the show, though, is the new rework of the 200BX. Now, I never really did much with the 200BX, mostly because I thought it was particularly ugly. But the new vehicle they brought in, which is another version of this, well, that's also very ugly. It's like a mix between a Honda and a Silvia. But because I think it's unfair that I slapdash together mods that I get judged on these people's skill levels. So I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna fine-tooth comb it, and I'm gonna find everything wrong with this car, so then I could feel a little bit better about myself. First, looking at it, have they fixed? Okay, well, no, they fixed that. Alright, well, this could take a bit of time. Oh, okay. I think I found it. So, delving through the code and everything, wasn't able to find very much, but then I was able to create a list of things which I think is wrong with this new car. Some of it may be hangovers from the previous version, but whatever. The first thing I noticed is they have the normal version, then they have the hatchback version, which I am glad that they made a hatchback finally. Like, it should have been a hatch to start with. It looks like a hatchback. Usually in the S13, which is based off of, these didn't really cross over, but the first one we see is a 180 on a Silvia rear. Now, in real life, this is called a 1via, and they were incredibly rare because nobody particularly liked them, or at least there were a few people. The pop-up headlights weren't particularly a bad thing, it's just it looked bad on that vehicle. And then there's no like fastback sort of looking thing, which this was its like defining feature. So as a result, the 1via not very popular. Do you know what was really popular though? The Sil 80, which is the other way around. I actually had a Sil 80, so I did make it myself and the paintwork was there. But if we try to look for a Sil 80 equivalent, the only one we find is way down here from factory. Now, it is true that the original Sil 80 was actually not made technically by Nissan, but they did consider it to be an official vehicle, so they label it as much, though it was made by an external tuning house. They've got the law kinda right, but I hate that the 1via is so much more prevalent in this new update compared to the Sil 80 equivalent. Now, this isn't really so much of a thing that's wrong, but more of a gripe that I have. Because this is like the worst of both worlds. I mean, come on! So this now is where the most problems lie, in the technicalities of the engine bay model. But that's where I live, in the land of technicalities, so I have to nitpick. It's a part of my contract. So, this is the engine, and I hate it. Do you notice anything wrong straight off the bat? Yeah, probably the fact that it doesn't have a throttle body. It has the throttle plate on the plenum of the intake manifold, but there's no throttle body. Jesus, what? It's so annoying. The moment I lifted the hood, I was like, oh, okay, well, there's the problem. But I get it. Maybe they wanted to keep the poly count low. Sure. Okay. Then why is this intake, if we switch over to a turbo, so goddamn weird and complicated? But I am jumping ahead a little bit. Let me go back. And I've gone back to a sports intake, of which there is no ITB set up. Please, devs, I love ITBs. Most people do, even if they would prefer to actually drive a turbo car because they have real amounts of power. It's still cool to have. Still though, that's more of a gripe than an actual technicality of wrong. Do you know what is technically wrong? This V-band clamp. Why? For one, the V-band clamps are really only meant to be for holding in high amounts of pressure in very specific situations, not on a suction pipe for an intake. That is completely overkill, costs way too much. To be honest, it could actually just be a bit of hard plastic and a soft plastic over top going over a rib, and that's all you would need. If you needed something a little bit more, you could probably go with something like this. But even sometimes, those cost too much for the penny pinchers. So sometimes, they'll use this. But wire as well can also sometimes be expensive. So they'll go with a very simple punch steel thing. Now, that is all to say that using a V-band clamp is just overkill, and no factory would ever do it. Now, I probably wouldn't have even noticed this if it hadn't have been modeled incorrectly. As you can see here, it goes inside the pipe. That's just irksome. Come on! Now, it is a little bit hard for me to show you what's going on here because there's this line here. And that line is the brake. Oh, dearie me. All right, before you say, well, that's probably just a vacuum line. 1, no. 2, no! This is the vacuum line, which goes into some weird T-junction box thing. I don't know what this is meant to be. Anyway, moving on. It goes into the intake, and wouldn't you know, it doesn't light up. But let's go back to the brake. It has the brake booster. It has the vacuum line coming in. It's got this reservoir here, which is floating. Yep. Anyway, moving on from that. This has not got a top on it. Now you may be thinking, well, they're just trying to save polygon counts. Sure, but then the end of this pipe has a triangle on it. Like, what the hell? And then, as I said, that line goes into the intake. And wouldn't you know it, it doesn't line up. But that's fine, because it shouldn't be going there anyway. Moving on. Have you noticed another glaring issue? Yes. It's the valve cover. I don't think I have ever seen a valve cover that uses 2 bolts per side to hold it down. That is severe underkill. If we have a look at the CA18, which this is based upon, you can see here that it has at least 4 per side. And I'm gonna guess that there's probably some down the back and probably some underneath this spark cover. Also, this engine most of the time came with individual coil packs, whereas this one runs off a distributor. Now, if you don't know the difference between a coil pack and a distributor setup, is a coil pack is basically more tunable and has less mechanical moving parts, so there's less need to do repairs. The coil packs do often die, so that argument is completely invalid. Now you may say once again, hey Phil, maybe it's because they wanted to keep the poly count low. I hate you. Even covered engines like the ETK engines will have indicated more bolts. Now I know that this is material, but this is covered. This engine cover is not a selectable part you can take off. You have to, like, rip it out? Can you even? Hold on, let me get back. Ha! Nope, doesn't even come off. And that indicates more bolts than this thing. To be honest, it wouldn't actually be that big of an issue if it wasn't so predominant with the massive indentations, which I'm pretty sure would interfere with camshafts at the amount of size like, my god, that's huge! And you can't say that it doesn't line up with anything, because this is where the spark plug is. That is right there, right in line. What else is wrong with the valve cover? I personally think it's this oil cap. What is this wonky ass model? There's way too many polygons here, and it's all over the place, and not to mention that the materials are all weird, and it's just, why? Why did you do this? What Were you hurt as a child? What is this? Whilst we're around the brake booster side, that is not a normal sort of exhaust that you would have seen on an engine of this era. I've said this many a times with people that make automation vehicles. They tend to always just put extractors on, like the tubular headers, thinking that, oh, yeah, great, more power. Companies don't like to do that if they don't have to. This here is an SR20, a higher performance naturally aspirated version. You can even see that has a cast manifold. It's a little bit hard to see behind this shielding, but that is an O2 sensor going into clearly a cast manifold. Now it does go tubular afterwards, but the manifold itself is usually too expensive and complicated for most manufacturers to bother with. Now, let's have a look at a little bit more of the stock turbo setup. You see this tiny little thing? That's a sort of intercooler that you would find on a normal vehicle. It's very tiny. It's puny. It is completely useless. Even a big giant Barra, which is 4 liters, has a very small intercooler. So why does this stock engine in a 90s 2-liter 4-cylinder have this goddamn monstrosity? This thing is giant for a stock engine. Look at the size of that behemoth! That is clearly aftermarket. Oh god, and would you look at that, the V-band doesn't line up. But at least a V-band might exist on this side. Honestly, it wouldn't be from factory and it's still kinda overkill. You're more likely to use those sorts of clamps more on the exhaust side. Oh god, okay. Well, technicalities, I know, I'm very, very nitpicky. But that's where I exist in the land of nitpickiness. And then when I'm making my own things, just ignoring and hoping other people don't notice. But let's say you want to upgrade your lovely turbo system. Let's say you want to go all the way to the top end. What do you think will change here? A bigger turbo? A better exhaust manifold? Maybe a bigger intake? Maybe a bigger intercooler? Well, let's try it out. Nope, they've changed this to metal. That's it. This is more than just like not wanting to have bigger files. There's actual problems I have here. Could you imagine trying to get this bent up? That would be just the worst, the absolute pits. Now, this is the sort of level that you would expect from me, somebody who isn't particularly paid very well and kind of does things on a whim of being like, sure, why not? I don't know how to do materials, so this is what this would end up like. An aftermarket system like this would probably have a whole bunch of like weld seam lines to show that they've attached all this together. And you know what? It wouldn't even go like this. It would probably go like this, and then it probably would stick out around here somewhere. This is not a realistic pipe at all. And as for that intercooler, oh look at that, they didn't need to upgrade it because it was already overkill. But hey, if we follow that around, we have a look at the pipe goes through here underneath the battery, weird material glitch there, and then, oh, no throttle body. Whoops-a-daisies. Now, this last thing, I had to dig quite deep for. Is it important? No. Will any normal person see it? No. Did I see it? Got you now, Beam devs. There's a slight little material issue. You can almost see it from here. Do you see it? How about now? What if I give you just a little bit more time? Do you see it yet? No, it's not the clipping of that. No, it's this. You don't notice that? There you go. Now do you see it? They, for some reason, accidentally applied the radiator material onto the end of the radiator pipe, but that's not the only one. They've done it to this one, they've done it to this one, and then at the other end, they've done it to this one. And when I noticed this, I was having a bit of a look around at all of the pipes and whatnot to see which ones are doing it. I also noticed that there's no fan, but it said electric fans, but there's a fan shroud for a mechanical fan. And yes, it's the same between the race and non-race. I've also just noticed the line doesn't match up. Oh, boom, headshot, yay. Now for the final mistake inside the engine bay. Remember this brake booster? Isn't there meant to be something next to it in a manual? Yeah, a clutch master cylinder usually would go here. And no, it is not inside the cabin. It just doesn't exist. Yes, this is a manual, as you can see. It has a manual shifter. And yes, there is... Oh, no, this is the American one. There is a clutch pedal, so you can't get away with that. Anyway, moving along. Let's now go to the next problem with this model. If we have a look at the transmission, which is modeled low poly, low detail sort of thing, you can see here that we got a shifter pointy thingy, which is usually only on automatics, but then we have a clutch slave cylinder, which is usually for manuals. Let's switch to an auto, shall we? You can see that it's got the automatic shifter, but having a look at the transmission, oh, look at that! It's got the thing there for the clutch slave cylinder. Ha! Okay, technicalities. I love it in this area. It's nice and cozy and warm. Nice and toasty and warm. Ah, yes. Wait, are those my mods? So, if you've ever been in this situation where you've gone to get out of the car and then you realize, whoops-a-daisy, the fuel filler is on the wrong side. Oh, well, let me just get turned around, and oh no, you've fallen into the same issue because you realize that you're a dunce. Well, usually if we go into here, this little fuel thing will have an arrow next to it, denoting to you which side the fuel filler is on. And this doesn't have one. Well, don't worry. There's a reason it's not there, and the BeamNG devs have been very smart about this. If you have a look at the fuel filler, wait, no, hold on. If you have a look at the fuel filler, wait, no, hold on. If you have a look at the fact that it doesn't have a fuel filler, it's not a problem. Now, this has been a thing with the BeamNG vehicles for a long time, and it was actually Muye who was the one that pointed it out to me on Twitter a long time ago. But then I was reminded by the fact that the dash was missing that little tidbit of information. Now, not like you'd like to know really where the fuel tank is. Oh, if we roll this over, yep, the fuel tank is right in the crumple zone. There you go. Previously, it's not historically been the best place to put a fuel tank. But don't worry, this is actually where the 180 put it as well, so all things are good, right? Now, the final issue, and it's a pretty big one. If you've gone through and you've gone, you know what, a normal car is not enough for me anymore. I've driven a lot of them. Let's say, bring out a drift version with lovely decals. Look at that, drift gear, Roik, I'm not sure, Oilex, Tim's, and then on this side we've got Smith, Raigtford, and Kiol, and Excel. Yeah, they mirrored it. But it's not as simple as what you may think. They didn't do my mistake where I mirror the body and then forget that I have to invert the UV mesh. This is actually not fully back to front. See this here? That is not back to front. And it is not as if it's reversed back here. It's correct on both sides. It's every other decal. So they've made the decal and then mirrored the decal wrong. It's funny. Now, I know that sometimes drift vehicles do this, but I'm pretty sure that that is not what they're doing here. Yes, some drift cars do put the decals the wrong way around. I don't think that's what's happening here. I think they just did a whoops. No, okay, it does look like they do the entire liveries backwards. Huh. Back when I was a part of this, they used to only do like maybe one sticker backwards, or their name backwards is a thing. I didn't realize it did the whole sides of cars backwards. Frick, that was my whole crowning like top achievement thing. Turns out I'm just an idiot. Well, this has been a fairly fun episode. Please don't take it too seriously. I know I don't need to be defended. My mods are terrible. So when people go onto the BeamNG repository and say that my mods are terrible, it makes sense. They are actually bad. What I don't want is somebody to go that's brand new, see a mod, go, oh, that looks good, and then they get it and then go, well, if this is the best they got because it's got 5 stars, then, oh, I don't like mods, they suck. Like, they may think that Modland is the level of mod quality, so no need to defend me there. And also, no hate towards the devs, I'm just having a little bit of fun. The engine-based stuff is really actually meant to be more just to show clutteredness that you would usually find in an engine, without actually having to be too technical or whatever looking into it. It's just to fill out the engine bay. Because nothing is actually properly simulated. There is no difference between having individual coil packs or a distributor sort of system. Same with, it doesn't matter where the brake lines go, because that is all simulated in code and not so much in the actual 3D model of it. So it's just fun. We're just having fun here. And you know what's also fun? My channel members! To all of you, I say a very thank you! You all rock and are really, really cool. You are very much appreciated. For everyone else, though, I'll catch you all next time. Goodbye.